In a sport as fast-moving as mixed martial arts, it's always good to have an idea of where the next big thing is going to come from, where the potential champions of the future may be sitting. And for our money, these 10 rising prospects and contenders look like they're about to make a major splash in 2023. Let's get into it. Bo Nickal. What better place to begin than with a word for the UFC's newest marquee signing? Anyone who has their ear to the ground on the wrestling scene would have been able to tell you everything you need to know about Bo Nickal's prowess long before he transitioned to MMA. An outstanding college wrestler who narrowly missed out on competing at the Olympics, Nickal has already become something of a sensation in mixed martial arts, an aggressive finisher who has racked up a series of first-round stoppages. After impressing over 2 appearances on Dana White's Contender series, the UFC decided to give this inexperienced prospect a shot at the big time. And boy did he take it, running through Jamie Pickett for the first round win. Sure, there was a little bit of controversy over a low blow that may or may not have helped him in this pursuit of the takedown, but Nickal was already well on his way. This middleweight prospect is already being looked at in relation to a top 15 test, which is crazy because he hasn't even had 5 pro fights yet. That should tell you everything you need to know here. Jailon Almeida. Jailon Almeida entered the UFC as a major 205-pound talent after a submission victory on the Contender series, debuting with a first-round knockout to announce his arrival. But it was when Almeida decided to move up to heavyweight, that's when people started to really take notice. A skilled grappler who really does look to be a major threat with his technical skill, Jailon scored back-to-back first-round subs to prove his suitability for the division. But when this Brazilian finisher put away Shamil Abdurakhimov in the second round for a $50K bonus, that's when the conversation started to shift. Now number 12 in the division and with a 100% finishing rate, the question now is just how devastating his abilities are at the highest level. We've seen enough to know that Jailon Almeida is ready, but with a matchup against Jairzinho Rozenstruik ahead of him, the fun part is about to begin. Mohammed Makayev. Mohammed Makayev may have a long road to recovery ahead of him thanks to a frankly insane submission escape he pulled off at UFC 286. Or, to be more blunt, this 22-year-old super prospect simply refused to tap to a leg lock that was all the way in. Not only did he not submit, but despite his leg being totally mangled, he found his way to top position and tapped his opponent just moments later. People like to rag on Makayev for being too control-heavy at this stage in his career, but what we see when we look at this flyweight prospect is a 22-year-old who is 4-0 in the UFC with 3 finishes. He went 23-0 as an amateur, and even though some of his performances have left some fans disappointed in terms of action, he might not reach his prime for another 5 or 6 years, so relax, guys. Mohammed Makayev has all the time in the world to hit his stride, a legitimately unique talent. Adrian Yanez. What's the first word that springs to mind when I think of Adrian Yanez? Well, the simple answer, hands. This dude has some of the sharpest boxing in the sport today, making him a standout prospect within the stacked bantamweight picture. His 5 UFC appearances have already produced 4 brutal finishes, and with a fight against Rob Font coming up for his pay-per-view main card debut at UFC 287, expect a lot of fans to jump on this bandwagon before too long. His hand speed is quite frankly insane for the division, and the amount of power he can generate through his clean technique is going to make him a problem for the upper tier. Now ranked at 12 in the world, the bigger tests will, of course, lie in front of Adrian Yanez, but based on his early performances, this guy has championship potential written all over him. Gurram Talade. In the sea of great lightweight prospects, don't make the mistake of counting out Gurram Talade. He may have come up short by way of split decision to the excellent Damir Ismagulov last time around, but Gurram is still very much in the conversation when it comes to the best rising talents at 155 pounds. The Georgian Viking has a very well-rounded skill set, a proven finisher who, despite having only 2 fights in the UFC, lost one of those to Ismagulov, who was a total beast, and then won the other one against Mateusz Gamrot. And if you know anything about Gamrot, you'll understand that Kuta Talade is already the real deal. It'll be hard for any fighter to break through at lightweight right now, especially with all of the big money fights up top. But Kuta Talade is certainly one to keep an eye on, a guy who is one big victory away from really making some noise. Erin Blanchfield. If you're looking for a fighter within women's MMA who could be seen as a female Khabib, well, look no further than Erin Blanchfield. Okay, we know that the Khabib label gets thrown around too much, but within that 125-pound mix, the results kind of speak for themselves. Blanchfield is an overbearing wrestling and grappling threat, the kind of fighter who cuts through defenses, hammers with ground and pound, and easily submits most opponents who cross her. She's the reason no one is talking about Molly McCann anymore. That one-round destruction was all kinds of nasty. And when the time came for her to take an almighty step up against Jessica Andrade, she broke her within 7 minutes. Blanchfield is only 23 years old. People, prospects in MMA rarely come around this young and dominant. And given that the flyweight title picture has been blown wide open after the dethroning of the longtime champion Valentina Shevchenko, all of a sudden, Blanchfield is looking more and more likely to rise up and stake her claim at being the #1 in the sport. Ilya Toporia. Ilya Toporia was once primarily seen as a grappler. Well, I say seen as a grappler, but he literally finished his first 7 opponents by submission, with only one of them making it out of the first round. But since signing for the UFC, you'd be forgiven for thinking this guy was a knockout artist. Out of nowhere, this 26-year-old featherweight started producing huge power punches on the feet, rattling off 3 straight KOs, including one at lightweight. Most recently, the UFC opted to set Toporia up for a matchup against his fellow rising talent Bryce Mitchell in front of him, a stellar grappler in his own right. Ilya managed to tag him hard on the feet, and against all odds, he found an arm triangle in the second round to score the tap against one of the very best match specialists in the division. And the way he bulldozed through Ryan Hall, yeah, it was a real display of BJJ defense, but also superior physical strength. He could probably be quite effective as a full-time lightweight too, but for now, 145 pounds is where he remains. Toporia is a problem, folks, and he's already in the top 10. Jack Della Maddalena. Jack Della Maddalena is a terrifyingly good striker, that much is clear. And as an Australian with some real appeal back home, there's every chance that the UFC are slowly recognizing his commercial potential. The dude is 26 years old, 14th in the world at 170 pounds, and his striking is all kinds of devastating. Since debuting in the UFC, Della Maddalena has gone a perfect 4-0, with none of the fights reaching the second round. His opening trio of knockouts were enough to get people talking, but when he took to the cage for a hometown show at UFC 284 against Randy Brown, it was almost as if he ascended to genuine contender before our very eyes. After dropping Randy to the mat, Maddalena showed a different dimension to his game, locking up a rear naked choke to net himself a $50,000 bonus and a win that didn't even last half a round. A major prospect from the Oceanic region and a guy who could be a title threat sooner than you think. Armand Sarukian. The phrase baptism by fire is the perfect way to sum up Armand Sarukian's debut in the UFC. Some fighters get an easier entry point when they make their first walk, but Armand, he was matched up with Islam Makhachev. Yeah, that was almost unfair to him, especially when you consider that he was just 22 at the time, and what's crazier still is that Sarukian looked really good in there with Makhachev. He lost, sure, but a new prospect was born, and since then, the now 26-year-old Sarukian has only gotten better, going 6-1 in the stacked 155-pound division, losing only to Mateusz Gamrot in one of the wildest 5-round wrestling matchups you'll see. This guy is supremely physical, very technical with his wrestling, and an excellent kicker and all-round striker. He also has time working in his favor. At 26, we may not see his actual prime for another 2 or 3 years. A scary thought considering he's already number 8 in the world. Shavkat Rakhmonov. And finally, we come to our number one pick, Shavkat Rakhmonov. This electric welterweight contender may have finally gotten a major boost to his public appeal after an insane appearance on the UFC 285 main card. But those of us who knew how good this guy was were not surprised. 17 fights, 17 finishes, and a reasonably equal divide of 8 knockouts and 9 submissions. Yeah, this guy's resume is really starting to back up all the hype. He has already beaten some excellent top 15 welterweights, and now that he's comfortably situated in the top 10, Shavkat's next fight will likely put him within touching distance of a title shot. This Kazakh warrior can do it all. He's a measured and patient striker who has a wide range of tools at his disposal, and as he showed us at UFC 285 against Jeff Neal, his ability to submit his opponents is just as good. There might not be a more dynamic, well-rounded threat at 170 pounds right now, so whatever you do, make sure you keep a very close eye on Shavkat Rakhmonov this year, because if he does win the title, don't say we didn't warn you. That's it for our top 10 rising stars of UFC 2023. Who do you have your eye on? Is there anyone else you think we should have included? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel.